Real talk with real people shaping the future of work and life. This is Resume Assassin Unfiltered. No fluff, just unfiltered stories, insights, and inspiration to fuel your next move. Layoffs, they've become kind of a headline that we can't escape, you guys. So I would say tech, healthcare, finance, really, you name it, companies are tightening their belts and they're leaving thousands of people wondering, could I be next? And the truth is, no one is completely immune to layoffs, but there are smart strategies you can use to make yourself as close to layoff proof as possible. And that's why today's conversation is so important. My guest, Bryan Creely, is a career strategist, former corporate recruiter, and the powerhouse behind a massive YouTube channel where he's helped millions of professionals navigate career transitions with both confidence and clarity. He's been on both sides of the hiring table, you guys, and he knows exactly what it takes to stay indispensable in today's market. Bryan, welcome to Resume Assassin Unfiltered.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, so Bryan, I know before we started the episode today, you brought up to me that before we really dig into the topic, we need to understand why all of these layoffs are happening. So from a high level, can you kind of talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's over the last 20 plus years, I think we've seen a complete shift in how corporations operate. There's always been this, I speak a lot about this on my YouTube channel, about this pendulum that kind of swings back and forth, and it's like the employment power pendulum. And sometimes it's buried sometimes it's at the employer side. Sometimes, seems like very rarely, it's in the employee side. In an ideal world, we want to see it kind of right in the middle, where neither party has too much power. It's kind of they work symbiotically with one another. But what has happened is over the course of time, typically what you'll see is a corporation will, and this usually follows along with the economy. So when you see like economy's doing well, corporations start to ramp up. They start to hire more people, corporate blow kind of happens, and then there's usually some big event that happens, whether it's 9/11, or it could be the subprime crisis. Basically, what these companies do is they use there's an opportunity to right size. They start to lay all these people off, and it was usually like a once in a 8 to 10 year cycle. And over time, this employment pendulum has kind of been shortening, where the employer, from 2010, basically uninterrupted to when the pandemic hit, we had a period of time where there was really not any major layoff events. And so the corporations bloated and bloated. But it got to a point where in 2020, when kind of things went and completely shut down, I feel like that was, if you were to stick a pin in where the definitive shift was to the layoff cycle shortening and shortening, I think it was in 2020, because suddenly companies realized that they could right size their organizations. It's usually like the first mover. One company starts to do it, then all the rest of them follow suit, and we started seeing the layoff cycle shortening and shortening and shortening. And so now it's like once every 2 years. It almost seems like it's almost every year we have a layoff cycle. Things get good, and then suddenly, we don't have that 10-year period in between layoff events anymore. Now it's you're almost having to approach your career out of necessity, because this is how corporations kind of handle things, is out of almost on a fractional level. You almost have to approach yourself as I guess like a free agent mentality, because the pendulum has just shortened and shortened and shortened. And there's only, in the last 5 years, there was like a period of like, it seemed like 10 minutes that was buried on the employee side back in 2021, where everybody was able to land really good jobs.
Yeah.
But that really ended pretty quickly. And now I just think corporations are just so short-sighted. The incessant demand for the next earnings cycle, these corporations, the CEOs, the executive teams are just always chasing after such a short-sighted process, and it's shortening and shortening. And so what I think we're seeing is layoffs have become pretty much just a common part of careers. And when I talk to somebody in my coaching practice that hasn't been laid off in the last 10 years, it's like almost like, holy crap, like,
Yeah.
It's like almost like going to a zoo and seeing an animal that it's like a
Right?
or
I agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's like so many people have and people who had long careers that were really successful have one layoff event, whether it was in 2020 or 2020, 2022, 23, and suddenly they just like they can't get back on track. The
Yeah.
one layoff leads to they were in a comfortable place, they got laid off. They weren't necessarily thinking that that wasn't even an option for them because their entire career had been spent in relative comfort and security, and then suddenly they find themselves on the open market. They're going to a new employer who has this short term mentality. They don't have the same internal equity build up at that company. And they find themselves in layoff after layoff. And companies just they'll take a full time headcount, they'll turn it into a, 2 or 3 headcount fractional role. I know a lot of recruiters experience this where they got laid off from a full time job and then they later on got hired back, but in a contract position that was not benefits eligible, and suddenly you don't have really a career anymore. And I think people are struggling to adjust to that kind of reality. And so there is probably has never been a greater need for what I call like reclaiming control in your career. And I guess you could extrapolate that as building a layoff free lifestyle because it's getting harder. To be perfectly honest with you, it's getting harder to do that. It's getting harder to. I don't think that you can find an employer, a singular employer anymore, or at least it's very rare where you can find a singular employer and just and park yourself and spend 10 years really investing in a career. They're eliminating middle management. So career paths aren't even there anymore. And once you get to a certain point in the, in the wage ranges, it's your name gets circled on a layoff list. And when they can now they're starting to look at AI tools that can
Mhm.
eliminate people's jobs. And so companies are now being more vocal. At first it was like, well, we're not really going to do that. We're just going to supplement just a little bit of extra productivity. But now we have companies that are just flat out coming out and saying, yeah, we're investing in AI and we're going to, be using that to eliminate jobs or at least change the scope of jobs. And then they claim, well, it's going to move into different types of roles. You're going to have to kind of evolve and pivot. And I think that that's part of being a layoff free lifestyle is the pivoting with what we're faced with. I think the most disruptive period of time since probably the industrial revolution, at least since the dot-com bubble,
Mhm.
the dot-com era, or potentially even, I would even I think I would suggest even bigger than that with going all the way back to the industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, because it's just completely changed how we approach careers. We don't know what work's going to look like in the next 5 years. If you look at like
Yeah.
when ChatGPT was released, it was in 2022. I was actually doing some research on this recently because I was thinking it had been longer, but I come to find out that the first public release was actually in November, I believe, of 2022.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't realize
and when
that.
you think about like how much and people will a lot like when I talk about like the not necessarily the danger of AI, but the be aware of it and be aware of how it's going to impact your career. That's when I give that message.
Yeah.
People inevitably will come out and say, it's not good enough yet. If you've ever used these tools, it does a bunch of crap. It's not going to be able to replace people. And in today's state, I 100% agree with that. I've seen the tools, I've played around with some of these tools, and they cannot replace the human element of it. And there's a lot of, I made a video about AI slop really, really recently
Mhm.
about how there's so many, every single company nowadays is coming out with, like my website builder
Yep.
create this content of this web page with AI, and I just like out of
Yeah.
curiosity click on it, and it creates this total garbage web page, and I'm like, this is not even at all usable. So I don't even. It's like a novelty almost. Like they're just throwing these companies that traditionally never even had an AI piece are throwing it up on their services. The fact is that we're being inundated with it, and that's just where
Yeah.
things are going in the future. And I think that that's going to be a for for the person who's trying to navigate careers. This is a huge disruptor, and when layoffs have become such a normal, part of our society, I don't think that this is going to certainly make it any better. And then the real question becomes is like, well, how do you make sense of this job market? And then how do you going forward, how do you navigate it and what do you need to do? The question is becoming increasingly complex. I don't think it's just a simple matter of like, well, write a better resume and all that stuff. I think that's a component of it, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more to this story, and it's evolving. The speed at which these tools are being innovated and iterated. If we've only been using these tools for the last 2 or 3 years, just functionally speaking in today's society. Where are we going to be in 5? Where are we going to be in 10 years? What is my kid's who's in kindergarten? What does his
Mhm.
future look like? That's the stuff that makes me go, man, this is definitely like we're in uncharted territory. Like we're all kind of
Yeah,
just like figuring this out together. Like there's no
totally.
like clear answer of, oh, this is what you need to do, because things could completely change in 5 years. The next release of, whatever super AI comes out, it could change everything. And I don't think AI is the be all end all. Don't get me wrong. This is not really meant to be like a bash AI type of thing, but it's really more like eyes wide open. And this now has to be a big part of the conversation of how do you navigate careers going forward. And if you're not adapting and you're not somebody that has your head in the sand about whether or not AI is coming to impact things, we have to assume that it's going to impact things.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that that's an interesting point that you made about that 10-year layoff cycle and how drastically that's changed from 2020 and moving forward. And also, even working with the clients that I work with, and I've been in the space since 2008 working with job seekers, and I could feel the shift. Right when 2020, 2021, you could feel it. I don't know. Obviously there was a lot going on in society, a lot going on in the economy, but from a client standpoint, even I would have people that come to me in different spaces where they were always safe, or at least they felt safe. A guy that came to me who had 30 years of experience in the finance world, and then, like you said, now he's on the free market and he's like, what the hell do I do? I haven't searched for a job in 20 years. I'm not prepared. All of these companies are over hiring and then realizing we hire too many people. A year later, they're letting a bunch of people go. So then, you have that, and then you pair that with people who are both actively job searching, I should say desperately job searching because they've been on the market for so long, or like you said, they've gone through several rounds of layoffs with either the same company or different companies. And then, so you have those people on the market, and then you also have people on the market who are actually very happily employed, but they're terrified that they're
Mhm.
going to lose their job. And so they're passively applying. And so that's shooting up the number of applicants that an employer or a recruiter is managing for any given position. And now, like you said, now we have this other component that we have to think about, which is AI. And the thought that, hey, AI actually is taking over some jobs even quicker than maybe a lot of us thought would be possible. And we really don't know what it will be like in 5 years from now and 10 years from now. Like you said, I have a kindergartner, and I'm like, man, my husband and I are working with him to start a car detailing business because we're like, well, it was his idea, so we're not pushing it on him. But it's like, man, what is the world of work going to look like when he's 21? When he's 18? So there's a lot of moving parts that it's hard to know what will happen in the future.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting that you're getting your son to work, or your
It was his idea. We're not like, hey, dude,
yeah, like
start a
get him
business. But
started.
it's like, hey, this is actually a great idea.
I tell my kid he's the slacker. So kindergarten doesn't have his first business idea yet, but
Oh,
yeah,
my son's had like five already.
no, that's great. I mean, and I think that that's probably some of the mentality that people need to start looking at going forward. And it's not necessarily that you need to be an entrepreneur. And in fact, I don't recommend
Yeah,
entrepreneurship for most people because it's not the easier
agreed.
path. And quite frankly, the world doesn't need everybody being an entrepreneur because that eliminates even more jobs. The
Hmm.
employers are here for a reason. They obviously they have the products that they sell, but they also provide income in work, and not everybody's cut out for being an entrepreneur. And when I say things like, and this is one of the pillars that I have for reclaiming control in your career, is protecting yourself from income disruptions. And I mean, honestly, that's kind of even morphed into protecting yourself from your long-term career. You may not be able to retire in 10 years. For people who are like in their, 40s, 30s, who are starting to see the retirement,
Hmm.
wall hitting them, it's starting to come. You may not be able to retire without some level of income security that's outside of just a standard paycheck. I think too many people have relied on strictly just a singular paycheck, and what ends up happening is when you rely for a single paycheck to pay for all of your subsistence, that you're 100% dependent on it, When you lose that, you are completely powerless, and you start to make decisions that are not in your best interest because you're, to your point, you're grasping at straws. You're desperately seeking. And that's where you start to take jobs that are lower levels. That's where, somebody that was at a certain level, maybe of a senior leader that got laid off, and then they get laid off. They're dealing with the layoff. They're starting to thinking that, oh, it's going to be easy to get back into the job market. We're finding it's not easy to get back into a similar level role. In fact, most people that have spoken with who have gotten laid off have had to compromise on something, whether it's
Oh, really?
location, whether it's going into an office, whether it's compensation, title, level of responsibility. But when you're starting to deal with that, now you're getting laid off, and you're having to deal with all of the insecure, you're grasping at straws. You're taking the first job that comes your way. And then what used to be, I've seen this, and I'm sure you've seen it too, more than one perfect resume that gets completely derailed, or a
Mhm.
really strong resume, a really strong career that gets derailed because one issue happens and they don't have control over things.
Yeah.
They're completely at the mercy of the employer. And then what happens is one bad employer leads to another bad employer, leads to another bad employer, because you're starting to make decisions from a place of powerlessness. And when you're making decisions that are just grasping, you're not able to negotiate the better rates. You're not able to focus and say no to opportunities that are not in alignment with what you really should be choosing. You're not able to get an employer to see the value and like why you should be the one that they go above and beyond for, or that they maybe stretch their salary, or maybe they go back to their HR team and say, this is the guy that we want to elevate the role because we want to hire this person. When you're behind the eight ball and you're making decisions that based on panic and based on fear, which is what a lot of us are doing right now, it's like a vicious cycle. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And and it's really hard to watch that, especially people who get to the very end of their career. They work all the way up to their like 55 or 60, and then they have like 5 or 7 years left. They get laid off, and then they never really, some people just like basically leave the workforce. They're not ready to retire, but they kind of just give up. And so that's why like the concept of reclaiming control in your career, and you making yourself layoff proof, however you want to, whatever you want to term it as, is such an important thing. And I think that your point, you're probably teaching your son, I'm assuming it's a boy.
Mhm.
That's
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But it's a good thing that you're teaching those skills now, because I feel like that's going to become a bigger competency. And again, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to have multiple streams of income. Every time I say that, people just get like so grossed out by that
Yeah.
concept. But look around. If you had another way to pay your bills besides your paycheck and you get laid off, you don't have to panic. Yeah, it might be tight. You're probably gonna have to tighten up like some of your spending, of course, but you don't have to take the first crappy job that comes your way. You don't have to ruin your resume. And then like you're working in a certain direction for a certain period of time. You take this one job that's a one-off because you got laid off and it's completely on a tangent from your career, or it's a lower level with a crappy employer, bad reputation. Now you suddenly pigeonhole yourself as that thing. And the longer you stay in that new job, the more you become pigeonholed, the harder it is to reverse and go back to the exit that you left that was not part of your career plan. And suddenly now you're dealing with a lot more issues, and employers, with right, wrong, or indifferent, employers love to brand people based on a resume, based on a piece of paper. They love to create stories about people and then fill in their own blanks. And that's a really unfortunate thing for somebody that's worked an entire career building up a legacy, to have it be derailed. And I've seen this
Yeah.
happen so many times where somebody gets derailed in the final tenth of their career, final quarter of their career, and then they just kind of flounder across the finish line. So
Yeah.
multiple streams of income is something, it doesn't have to be a business, but it should certainly be like, how can you start to do like passive income streams are my favorite.
Mhm.
And this is, I'm not trying to get into like what like kind of income streams people should pursue, but thinking of how can you make some, even if it's just fractional, even if it's just like, I'm making $200. Like when I was approaching my own multiple stream of income
Mhm.
philosophy, I was looking at it more as, if I could just pay for like a single bill, like how can I replace this single bill? I've got a car payment. How can I make enough money to pay for the car payment? Then the
Yeah.
next income stream is, how can I pay for, as you start to like kind of compound it and get some traction, or do you, then it starts even getting big, like how can if I could get a single income that pays for my mortgage, so I don't have to worry about the mortgage payment. I can keep the roof above my head. And then if I have to go and do other things, it can help a little bit here and there. but I was just looking at it like bite size, like not trying to go, okay, I need to recreate $100,000 a year salary, even if it's just $200 a month. Like, how do you
Yeah.
start to do that? There's lots of ways to do that in today's economy. The resell. I mean, you go to a thrift store and buy stuff and then resell. My brother ended up buying. He found some company that was selling, like going out of business, and they were selling all their
Mm-hmm.
office equipment. And he went in and bought a bunch of like office chairs and it's like old iPhones, like their corporate iPhones that were like 2 and 3 years old. They weren't even like new iPhones. But basically he cleaned them all up and he got them all and he had them sitting in his garage. And then one by one he was selling these. They're like these premium, like really nice office
Mm-hmm.
chairs that you would normally, if you were to go into like a office supply store, you'd be paying like, $600-700 for these chairs. And he was selling them for $200-300 a pop, and they were in really good shape. Barely sat. They were like in a conference room that nobody ever hardly sat in. And he was making a couple $100 a pop on them, and like he bought them for like $20 a piece.
Wow.
So it's like,
Yeah.
and yeah, like yeah, that's like one way, but there's lots of ways to make fractional income that you don't have to like. It doesn't mean you have to start a business. You can make some investments, get some dividend stocks. You could, there's lots of different things that you can do. What I don't like doing is trying to trade too much of my time for money where I'm like off doing like Uber driving or
Yeah.
like
Right.
Uber
You're
Eats.
gonna
Like
run
me,
yourself into the ground doing that.
yeah, and then you also have a depreciating asset. You got a car you're beating the
Yeah.
crap out of. People,
Right.
are like people don't tip and all that. Like there's that whole like the whole
Right.
like there's just
Yeah.
more issues
And
there.
I think that that's a really great point. And I've seen that in a lot of the clients that I work with, where those people who have diversified their portfolio, they have multiple streams of income in different ways. It definitely lessens the blow when you do get laid off. And then in turn, what that does is it allows you to be more patient with that next
Right.
opportunity that you take. So you can think more about not just, I need to get a job as soon as possible, but I want to get a job that's the perfect fit for me, both from a salary and benefit standpoint, but also from a culture standpoint and a lifestyle standpoint, and all of these things that are and should be really important as people are searching for a job. So, with all of those things being said, what are some things that people can do today to start making themselves layoff proof?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first and most obvious thing, and this is probably something that is a little it's probably so obvious that it's underrated.
Hmm.
Be what employers want.
Yeah.
If you just are somebody that works your job, goes in every day, does your work, and then goes home, doesn't keep up on trends, doesn't keep up on your latest skills, uses a kind of you're kind of on autopilot. And I think a lot of us are guilty of that. You get into a groove. You just got
Totally.
a regular paycheck coming in. But if you're finding that the market is, your skills start to atrophy, and this is one of the actual real dangers of AI, in my opinion. Probably the biggest
Hmm.
danger is skill atrophy. If you're like a software developer, for example, and you're relying solely on these tools, these AI tools to do all your coding for you, eventually over time, you're going to stop learning the proper syntax that you should put into your code because you're going to just rely on these other tools to do it. And when you actually need to go and hit the market and start doing a coding exercise in front of a live engineer, you're going to be like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
So I think that that's part of it is paying attention to what's going on in the market. If you're somebody that's gainfully employed, I would recommend that every few months, and this doesn't mean you have to actually apply for these jobs, but you should be paying attention to job postings, even if you're not looking,
Yeah.
just to see what the market trends are. Go to the local, whatever your industry conference is, and just see what things are emerging. Go onto your local, your industry blog. If you're a human resource person, see what's going on at the SHRM conventions and your local SHRM chapter. Be involved in that way, mainly to see like what's going on in the market, how's it evolving, and then
Yeah.
take a look at what the big alpha players in your industries, the industries that you're targeting, see what their job postings are, see what their people are working on, see what the people who are in those profiles, like who are in those jobs today, look at the kind of stuff that they've got. Because when you get, I should say, if you get laid off, I don't like to say when, but
Hmm.
if you get laid off, that's the competition. That's the people that you're going to
Yeah.
be competing against. And I found too many people will be apathetic. They'll get laid off, and then they'll come to find out they're really far behind the time. And then they'll say things like,
Yeah.
"Well, um, they'll come to me. I'm sure they do the same thing for you. They'll come to you. They'll like try to like fix your resume. Like, how do I work this resume so that I'm a better fit for this job?" And I said, "Well, you should have done it 5 years ago." You can't magically make experience that you didn't have. You have to be thinking in terms of like the stuff that you do today. It's kind of like fitness, like the stuff that you do today, like the diet that you eat today, the way that you take care of your body today is going to manifest in 5, 10, 15 years, not today necessarily. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing with your career. How your resume looks, and I use that kind of like as an like a abstract term. How your career looks 5 or 10 years is what you did 5 or 10 years early, and what you did in the past is what's going to control in trying to play catch up. It's almost impossible to get an experience or a skill on your resume in a meaningful way that an employer would care about. In other words, an actual piece of experience that has a measurable result to it that you can tangibly talk through deeply in an interview. It's really hard to do that when you're unemployed and you're trying to play catch up. So if you're somebody that's listening to this and you're thinking, well, I've got a good career going and I'm a little worried about it. Part of being layoff proof is be what employers want tomorrow, and you have to do that today. The things that you do today will impact your hireability and your desirability on the open market. If you are just like everybody else, you're doing look around your department. If you're just the average worker bee doing the average worker things, doing nothing that takes you and separates you from the rest of the pack, you can expect that there's a lot of other companies on the market that have the exact same groups of people doing the exact same things, all average, and then they all kind of flood into the market all at the same time when there's layoff events. You're going to be a sea of average. How do you stand apart from the crowd? And in a very real sense, high quality employers have their pick of the litter. They get thousands of applications. They get inundated and buried with these applications. And so recruiters, I know everybody likes to beat up on recruiters, but recruiters have a job of trying to get from, how do you get 1,000 or 1,500 people? And that's just the inbound applicants. That's not even including the source candidates that they're going out and actually looking for. Yeah, I think you worked at Amazon as well, right?
Yep.
Where
Yep.
you know that like you got this metric and this
Mm-hmm.
clock that's ticking, and if you don't get the right candidate in a certain amount of time, it's like, how many fills do you get? You have to get your numbers. Yeah, and that was like my team was always pitching, you have to get your numbers, you have to get your outreach numbers. And if I sat around waiting for one of those 1,000 applicants to be a good fit, it's like spray and pray. I was basically doing spray and pray as a recruiter. That was just like a nice to have if you had a candidate that you could fill through a job application, like an inbound application. But instead, I was mostly sourcing my candidates because if I waited around, I would never fill my jobs. So you've got that dynamic too. So it's not just like how many applicants are coming into the job, but how many candidates is the recruiter sourcing in addition to it? How many are coming through employer referrals? How many are coming through all these other channels that recruiters do? I mean, I don't know about you, but like when I was recruiting, like software developers and that sort of thing, I don't think I got hardly any. I mean, it was maybe 10% of the requisitions I filled came from an actual job applicant. Almost all of them came from employer referrals or my sourced
Absolutely. Yeah.
activities.
And I will say too, Brian, I've had conversations with probably thousands of recruiters over the last couple of years. Every single recruiter that I speak with is actively sourcing and recruiting on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
And
LinkedIn.
so, they are proactively building their pipeline. They're not passively, like you said, sitting back and waiting for applicants to come to them, where yes, they probably do, especially at some of the bigger companies. They're getting potentially thousands of applicants for any given position. They're still out there trying to build that pipeline of the top talent that's out there for that specific role.
Yeah, and so obviously you need to have a good resume. That
Yeah,
you have to be able to market and present yourself
absolutely. That's
correctly.
part of it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and that's, to me, it's actually a pretty small part of it, because
Hmm.
if you don't have all the other stuff, that's just a tool. And it's a very important tool, don't get me wrong. It's first impression and all that stuff. And I'm a firm believer that a good resume can take a good career and really make it stand out. A good resume is not going to, a well-written resume is not going to polish a bad career. There's only so much that you can do to a bad, if you don't have the stuff that employers care about and you haven't done it in a reasonably authoritative and stable way. And I know that's getting harder to do when companies are laying
Hmm.
people off every 6 months, and hopefully
Right.
recruiters are showing grace, but
Hmm.
the, but if you haven't, done that, the resume is not going to, like, the best written resume is not going to fix a bad career or a job hopped, unoptimized, like not well thought through career. So part of it is just having what the employer wants, but also part of it is having some sort of a strategy of knowing what it is that you're doing and what you're trying to do and the reasons why you're taking certain jobs. And even though that one job that pays you another 3 to 5 grand more is really tempting, you have to really think about, is that job really in alignment with where you should be going in 5 years? Because we all want the immediate fix. We all want the immediate, like, especially over the last, especially in 2022, when all these companies were hiring as many people as they could, and they were just throwing silly offers at people because there was this massive, like, kind of wave of hiring after all the layoffs that happened in 2020. And people were able to get a lot of jobs, so they were job hopping, and they were quiet quitting, and they were great resignation, and all of these terms that kind of came up. But a lot of people inevitably, and I was sitting there watching this going, this isn't good, because people are not really paying attention. Like, yeah, like, it might feel good in the moment to go tell your employer to go pound sand, but and during the Great Resignation, where it's like, finally, it's our time to, like, tell them what we really feel. And then it's like, after the party's over, who's left cleaning up?
Yeah,
You're stuck
absolutely.
with it. Then people who had good, solid careers, who left really good employers and thought that the grass was greener, ended up finding out that that's not the case. And now there's a lot of people who've kind of, like, derailed their careers because they weren't well thought out moves. So strategy is the second piece. So, like, well, really the third piece. So first piece is going to be having more than one way to pay for your bills, diversifying income. Second is going to be have the skills and the tools, resumes, and having the stuff on the resume that you need to have on there. And the third is going to be the strategy piece of it. That's another big component. And I would say the final piece for me that's really important, that a lot of people completely lack, and you kind of started touching on the importance of it. Recruiters are spending a lot of their time sourcing and building active pipelines, and they're spending their time not in job requisitions. And with AI tools, we're seeing a lot of, like, an inundation of AI resumes that are all kind of the same. And so a lot of people who kind of and it's even LinkedIn, like, a lot of the content I see on LinkedIn, people posting who never really posted before, suddenly are just plugging it into ChatGPT text generator, and now everybody sounds the same. Like,
Yep.
it's funny, like,
Scary.
I've
Yeah.
actually been accused of plagiarizing my own stuff. Somebody come to me and say, like, you people copying it. I'm like, I literally wrote this and people have been stealing it from me, and you're accusing me.
Sure.
So, you kind of have this kind of coming full circle of the building of some sort of, like, and I hate the term personal branding. I use it, but I feel like it's overused, and I feel like people don't really
Yes.
know what that even means. But it's basically like, does the workplace, does the industry, even smaller, like, if you were to, like, start from your department, the department you work in, how do they perceive you? Are you known as somebody that solves are you the person who's particularly good at Excel? Like, who knows like, everybody goes to you for Excel. Are you that person? Are you the person that is known to get things done? Are you the person that just never speaks up in the meetings? You just sit as a wallflower, and it's the second that the clock hits 5, you're out the door and all that stuff. Like, your brand starts at your actual work, but then your department, then it expands to your broader organization, like divisional or whatever, and then your company, even beyond that. Does anybody know you outside of your department? Does anybody have a clear understanding of what's the problem this person solves? If you walk around your organization and nobody outside of the people who work in your immediate cubicle area, your department meetings, if nobody knows what you do and what problem you are best known for solving, then you have a brand and identity issue.
Yeah.
And to me, if you don't have anything that you're particularly well known for, and particularly, like, that person is the person you go to for this thing, they are the expert in. You don't have that. That should be your first priority right now.
Yeah.
Get the skills that people are looking for, and then start to build a brand and identity, especially if you've started a new job. Because if you look around an organization, nobody knows who you are. Guess what? Those are the easiest people to put on a layoff list. Those
Yeah.
are the first ones that go on there.
Totally.
If you can't justify your like, why, the big why behind why they should keep you, then that's something that I would absolutely be working on. And then that needs to continue to expand, and it continues to expand beyond your company. Who outside of your organization? That's the next question. Who outside of your organization knows who you are and what problem you best solve? Who in your entire industry? Then that's where you really start to like, where the personal branding piece comes in, and it's just just think of it like as your reputation. What's your career reputation? Rather than like you don't have to be an influencer. You don't have to be like, I hate the term influencer too, but you don't have to be an influencer. You don't have to be like a personality on
Yeah.
on the internet, like none of that. But what you do have to do is be able to convey, these are the problems that I best solve. And this is
Yeah.
why you should take notice of me, because your networking is never going to work if nobody has a compelling reason to pay attention to you. Recruiters are never going to come and find you if you don't have a compelling reason for them to come find you. If you're just like every other person, there's no compelling reason for them to contact you over anybody else, let alone trying to negotiate better terms, trying to, to get with the alpha employers the very best opportunities. There's no compelling reason because they have thousands of other people. Good luck pushing back real hard on a job offer when you're trying to negotiate it, when they don't really look at you as irreplaceable. If they don't really look at you that way, you're pretty much, there's maybe some slight tweaking you can do, but you don't really have a whole lot of power. So kind of coming like full circle to this is like,
Yeah.
where is the power in your career? If you've let everybody else make decisions for you, if you've outsourced everything that you've ever done in your career, if you've been very passive and let work come to you, if you put your head in the sand with AI and emerging tools and trends, if you've just gotten comfortable in your job and for never paid attention to the market, you've never really built a brand and you don't have any passive income, you're completely powerless. You are completely 100% at the mercy of the employer taking pity on
Yeah.
you and keeping your job intact. And as we've seen over the last 15 to 20 years, and in particular in the last 5, that cycle is shortening and shortening. You used to be able to get away with hiding kind of under the radar for a period of time. Some people made careers out of it, but that is no longer the case. And, when they're eliminating, I worry about people who are graduating right now. I worry about
Mm-hmm.
jobs that are being eliminated. I worry about people who are stuck in mid or like lower level and are trying to move up in organizations. I worry about those people too, because they've gotten rid of all the mid managers. Like the war on mid managers has been a real thing. So the people there will still be those jobs, don't get me wrong, but the people who are getting them, because there's less of them and less high quality ones, if you're not doing the things that we've been talking about, if you're not doing those things, you are absolutely going to be there. The world is going to be increasingly haves and have nots. And that's, that's where we're heading.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody that's just and I'm not trying to be like fatalistic, because I do feel that there is a lot of there's a lot of opportunity, because the people who are actually doing this is such a small percentage.
Yeah.
So if you actually did this
Agree.
stuff, it's easy to stand up. Like, I look at it as an opportunity. Nobody else is doing this around me. If I just
Yep.
do this stuff, I'm going to immediately set myself apart from most of the
100%.
competition. Not all of the competition, but most of the competition, just by even having a voice or a clear value. Like, I hate the term value proposition too, because I feel like that's overplayed. But like all of these
It's
kind
true
of
though. Yeah.
these corporate buzzwords, if you're just able to start to elevate your brand, I guess you could say, so few people are actually doing that. It becomes very it becomes a competitive advantage in and of itself.
This is a conversation that I'm having a lot lately with clients because I think that that visibility piece that you're speaking about, some people are thinking about the visibility within their own company. Some people, not everybody, where they're building relationships both within their department and outside of their department and, just throughout all layers of the organization as a whole. But I think that many people aren't thinking about that visibility piece outside of their company, which is what you also alluded to. And I think that's for me and the conversations that I have with my clients is LinkedIn is actually a really great place to start building that authority when it comes to trying to convey why you're the go-to person, what you're the go-to person for, and why people should come to you as the go-to person for that thing. And I also agree that on LinkedIn it can be frustrating because now it's like there's kind of been this explosion of content on LinkedIn that is very obviously AI generated. But at the same
The
time,
comments
I
are just
also feel like LinkedIn is kind of at the very bottom of where it's going to be in terms of content. So if you can get in and start creating some content specifically on LinkedIn and start
authentic.
getting
Yeah,
some of that know
authentic.
like trust factor, that visibility there, that can be huge. And the people that I'm attracted to when it comes to content aren't necessarily the people that are just posting these generic tips. It's the people that are incorporating their personal stories and experiences. And you can tell when it's a very genuine post versus something that was just, popped in to ChatGPT real quick. So I think, like you were
Right.
saying, Brian, that's another really great way to start differentiating yourself and building that visibility, especially with recruiters, but also with other people within your industry.
Yeah, I mean, just even something as simple as telling your story,
Exactly.
everybody has a story, every one of us. And even if you're entry level, your story is your journey, your struggle,
Yeah. And
there's
so many people
something.
can relate to that, even at the entry
Yeah,
level.
it's
Yeah.
relatable, and it's like and people who can see that you're struggling because they've been there too, or they might be struggling themselves, and just even sharing in that and sharing the learning, the sharing the mistakes, the frustrations in a should say in a careful way. You don't want to come across as like being
No,
pessimistic,
you still have to think
negative.
about
Yeah.
what you're writing. And yeah, you
Yeah.
want to keep it mostly positive.
Like, what should your brand say about what do you want your brand to
Yeah,
say about you? But at the
totally.
end of the day, like, everybody has a voice, and just so few
Yeah.
people use it that it's a great opportunity for people to do that.
Brian, this has been an eye opening conversation. I've loved every second of it. Where can
Yeah.
we find you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've platform is YouTube. I've got a channel. It's called A Life After Layoff, which I started as a response to myself getting laid off in 2020 and then kind of experiencing this and sharing my perspective as a laid off person and somebody in the recruiting space. And so that's where I spend most of my time. But I also have a LinkedIn. You can find me. Actually, you can just go to my website. It's a lifeafterlayoff.com, which is, tracks with the rest of my channel. But Life After Layoff has all my socials on there. You can find me there. I'm on mostly on LinkedIn and TikTok and YouTube. Bounce between those three.
Cool. We'll have links in the description as well. Well, Brian, thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming on today.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was fun.